Hello fellow sim racers, it's another Assetto Corsa Competizione GT4 pack preview race. I'm in the Ginetta at Brands Hatch in some sort of vague attempt at theming these races, or at least a couple of them at the very least. If you want to learn anything useful about the GT4 pack, then do go and check out the main review on the main channel. But for now, enjoy the sights and sounds of a Ginetta in its, I'd say, pretty much home environment. Or at least as far as Assetto Corsa Competizione goes anyway. Let's go and get some Porsches by the looks of things. We've got a couple of Caymans directly in front of us, the Alpine and the AMG as well. Suspect they will be playing a bit of a role in the first lap. Probably should have started off in second gear rather than third. Didn't quite get the drive off the line. Horrible bit of understeer mid-corner. Nearly sent me into the Alpine, but somehow got away with it. AI braking very early, so pretty easy to dispatch that Porsche Cayman straight away. In fact, I'm not sure what this AMG is doing, just sort of dawdling around the outside of Druids. Trying to avoid getting a track cut penalty here. I might well get that straight away. With these super cold tyres, thanks to no blankets, we get a lot of understeer in the early lap and a half of the race. This is a car that's got a really strong front end actually, so once the tyres start to grip up, you kind of have to hope that the rears and the fronts grip up at a similar time, otherwise it can get pretty unbalanced. I just did a couple of laps here with the wrong tyre pressures as I brake on the grass, which is never a bad idea. As I said, slightly wrong tyre pressures meant the fronts came in long before the rears, and it was a horrible oversteery mess throughout the entire 2 laps that I managed before making a horrible mistake. So, lesson learned in that respect. Wow, it is fairly oversteery anyway. Admittedly, that one was somewhat aided by the curb. But we are taking the curbs. We're not shy of the curbs in these GT4 cars. As I've mentioned many times before, we've got the ground clearance to do it. So, yeah, curbs are delicious. Eat them whole. Took a long time to be able to get back on the power there. Perhaps could have taken a slightly later apex in retrospect. But we're still about a PSI down on the fronts from where we need to be. Front right's about right, but that only really comes into play in a couple of corners here at Brands Hatch. So, wow, this is a car that's trying to kill me. I do like this Ginetta. Perhaps a little bit more on some of the more open tracks. It's seems to handle the high speed stuff really well. Equally, it does seem to rotate really well in the very low speed corners. I've yet to drive it at somewhere like Zolder, but I suspect it would go very well there as well. I think, wow, I've got to stop braking. You know what it is? This is going to sound really stupid for a British person to say. It's because this car's right-hand drive. I know I drive a right-hand drive car on the road, but I certainly very rarely do in a racing sim, so I'm not used to the grass being, well, that far away on the left, so I'm used to be sat on the other side of the car, so I try and move over to it. So that's why we've caught the grass a couple of times. Have to pay extra attention to that. Something I could probably do quite naturally were I not talking to you guys and somewhat sleep deprived as well. But I've probably mentioned that in half a dozen videos as well. So let's not complain about being a dad, because it's wonderful, really. Oh, awful. I've got to work out how to get paddock hill bend right, and we've got to make an impression on this AMG Mercedes GT4, not GT3. Nearly made the mistake that, again, probably something I'll make in half of these videos. This car does pitch in really well, and that encourages you to take the kind of risks that I just did there. Just a little bit of rotation on the brake, the front end goes perfectly, and then it encourages you to get on the power so early, which again in some of the slow corners is just so quick. I think, you know, this really, I've done it again. This really does feel like a car that would go super well at Zolder or Hungaroring or somewhere like that. As on the grass again, concentration absolutely shot. Might have to go and take my real-world driving test again, because this is a poor showing for a right-hand drive driver. Does mean I'm absolutely gobbling the curb there, which might be fast, who knows. It's certainly not fast compared to the AI, who I've only got set to 98%. I'd ironically turned it down so I could get a bit more racing in, but it looks like my inability to stay off of the grass on corner entry is going to be a bit of a compromise in that regard. Like, I'm still very tentative through Paddock Hill. That's usually a good sign that I'm not confident in the car. 1:34.4. I was a good second quicker than that in the Porsche Cayman I took round here earlier, and that was just to do some filming. That wasn't proper performance driving, so not quick times at the moment, as you can probably deduce from, you know, using your eyes. It's a fun car to drive, this, though. I think that's the big takeaway. All the GT4 stuff aside, like, you know, less aero and what have you, this is definitely a car that just really wants to be finely balanced. You can see how much work I'm putting into the wheel, and that's an incredibly rewarding? Yeah, my inability to stay off the grass and even process simple words, just gone now. This is why these videos get hidden down on channel 2, because honestly, if the general public found this, can you imagine the scenes? Right, let's send it into clearways, like you really shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. I'm fed up at the back of that man filter car.
Lean on the left.
Braking in these GT4s is fun. I guess it's, again, because of the lack of downforce pushing the front tyres hard into the ground, but just there seems to be a bit more in the braking than there is with the GT3 cars, which are very much just pin the brake pedal to the floor and hope for the best. Wow, we are trailing the back end in here. It's too much fun, this car. I just want to drift it through every corner. And the ones I don't want to drift it through, I'm sort of doing it unintentionally because I've screwed up the entry. So, is how it is. 33.9. Yeah, times are coming down a bit despite the messiness. I do think it's somewhere like Brands Hatch, you're going to be maybe 8 to 10 seconds off the GT3 times, probably less than at other circuits. I've not done the testing, but somewhere like Silverstone that's so aero dependent, I expect the times will be quite different. In fact, if you've watched the British GT, wow, multi-class at Silverstone, horrible snap oversteer. I tried to carry a bit too much speed into the corner. But you've stuck with me so far, you know there's going to be more mistakes. Yeah, as I was saying, if you watch the British GT multi-class stuff at Silverstone, then you'll sort of understand the speed differential there. Yeah, Bathurst is another one, obviously, where you get the multi-class speed differential playing quite a big role, but I'm not necessarily sure that's just outright aero that's causing that, and it's more to do with the just the power difference in a lot of places. I've sort of checked out from a performance driving perspective here, not that I was getting particularly close to the limit anyway. So what we're going to do over this last lap and a bit is maybe just talk a little bit about what I'm really enjoying about the GT4 pack, because there's no chance I'm going to go and catch up with that Porsche. 3.5 seconds in 2 laps is beyond me, particularly in my state of mind at the moment, where I'm concentrating more on the talking side of things than the driving. So, GT4 pack. Big wins are, well, sheer variety of cars. And variety, by that I don't really necessarily mean that, hey, there's 11 cars and that's great, which obviously there is, and it is. What I mean is that the types of cars included, not by Kunos's choice, admittedly, by SRO's choice, or the teams competing in SRO, I should say, you get a wide variety of very different behaving cars. This Ginetta, for example, is a very pointy, racy feeling car. It's twitchy. You really have to balance it on the front end. It wants to bite you. You have to wrestle it. It's just fun throughout. Whereas something like the Porsche Cayman that we're dropping even further away from now as I just give up on the idea of catching him. The Porsche Cayman is a really refined driving experience. It's just a beautiful car to drive. It goes exactly where you want to put it. It does have a little bit of that sort of mid-engine car twitchiness that you would expect, but it's not a massive feature of it. You know, there's enough to keep the driving experience interesting, but you know, not enough to make it something that you'd not want to drive for a triple stint or something. Ginetta, yeah, I think one would be a long enough stint. And then you've got other cars. You've got the Camaro, which has a huge engine up front, so you have to drive it so differently just to coax the front end into corners. It just doesn't want to turn in the same way as some of the other cars. What else is very different? The Alpine. That's got a tiny little 1.8 litre turbo engine. It's very balanced. You've got to sort of throw it into the corners, and it feels quite poised when you do it, but you really have to carry the speed in. I'm just trying to think of all of the other cars in the pack. The KTM, well, that's an interesting one, and arguably not my favourite car in the pack by some measure. I've mentioned it through a few of these videos, so I'm just trying my best to block the AMG Mercedes behind now. We definitely have a full-on train going on. But this is pretty much the end of the race. Big wins, yeah, variety of cars, and the way those cars open up certain tracks that perhaps were a little bit neglected. I think, you know, Brands Hatch was one of them. Zolder's another one where the GT3 cars just feel a little bit clumsy. Doesn't happen with the GT4s. You can make more use of the track limits. You can smash over curbs that GT3 cars would otherwise just die if they hit. So some of those tight, twisty, kind of fiddly tracks all of a sudden become pretty good, actually. Like, Zolder is the right place for these cars. These feel epic around Zolder. Love it. Anyway, guys, I have rabbited on for a long time. This is the most incoherent video I've ever done, so if you've made it to the end, what's wrong with you? Thank you anyway, and I guess all that's left to say is enjoy the rest of your day.